What is up, everyone? In today's video, I'm going to be playing matchmaker for every single fighter from UFC 300. So main card, prelims, the winners, the losers, going to be booking these fighters up for what I would do for their next matchup. If you have some different suggestions, different big fights, let me know down below in the comment section. But let's just start off with the main event. I'm going to start off with the champ, Alex Pereira, and he really does have a lot of interesting options out there. Now, if there is just one fighter I want to see him fight next, regardless of the date, how far in the future, it would be Magomed Ankalaev. I just think at this point, Magomed's earned that title shot. He's on a 12-fight unbeaten streak. He's had some weird stuff, right? He had the no contest. He had the draw, so it hasn't just been, 12 straight wins, but he's just consistently very competitive with the guys he's in there with, and for the most part, beating the top competition here at 205. I also think there are some interesting other options where if Alex Pereira wants to go up to heavyweight, I'm not going to say I don't want to see him up there. I think he's definitely competitive, but I just don't know if this is the right time, and it's because heavyweight is just such a mess. You have Jon Jones holding on to that belt, wanting to fight Stipe Miocic. I cannot fathom why the UFC is still letting this happen. Does anyone want to see the Jon Jones-Stipe fight over Jon Jones-Tom Aspinall? I really just don't get it. Aspinall, in my opinion, is the best heavyweight in the world. I want to see him fight Jon Jones. For some reason, we're still stuck on the Stipe fight where he's been out forever. He's very old at this point. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But for me, if Alex Pereira is going up to heavyweight, I think he deserves to fight for an undisputed title. So if it's still going to be a mess, I'd rather him just stick around at 205. Now, he also mentioned the possibility of turning around and fighting at 301. Now, it seems like he's saying it's unlikely, but I feel like he's saying that from the perspective of like the UFC, setting that up as an actual main event. I mean, is it really that bad? Like, the card's not good. You just throw him right in as the main event and everyone's going to be excited. And I don't think he needs to be fighting like a top contender on that card. Like, he doesn't need to be fighting Magomed Ankalaev at UFC 301. You just go down the rankings, you find someone coming off a win, Nikita Krylov, Khalil Roundtree, Volkan Ozdemir, any of those dudes. Throw them in a title shot with Alex Pereira at UFC 301. Favorable matchup, kind of unintentionally, but a favorable matchup. Get him in front of his home crowd. He's going to look like a star, and you're just building the legend of Alex Pereira. So like I said, a ton of options there. If it was one specific fighter, it would be Magomed. But if he wants to turn around quickly, give him anyone in the light heavyweight division. Like, seriously, anyone. Let him defend that title at home in Brazil. Now, the loser of the main event matchup, Jamahal Hill. I think they've already gone back and forth. Jamahal Hill, Jiri Prochazka. This fight makes a lot of sense. If Jiri wins this one, he's pretty much right there for another title shot. Jamahal Hill just getting right back into the deep end here, putting himself back into title contention. Just two fun strikers. I really like that matchup. Now, looking at the co-main, Zhang Weili. There's only one woman that Zhang Weili should be fighting. It's Tatiana Suarez. Tatiana Suarez is 7-0 in the UFC. She has finishes over Alexa Grasso, Carla Esparza, and Jessica Andrade. As long as she can stay healthy, she can pose a legit threat to Zhang Weili, so I think that's a very interesting fight. And honestly, I would be super hyped if this one gets booked. I've been looking forward to it for a while now. Tatiana Suarez is dangerous, and I do think it would be a very competitive fight between those two. And I just don't know if anyone else is competing with Zhang Weili in that division. And then the loser of that co-main, Yan Xiaonan, I think she should be taking on Amanda Lemos. Lemos is coming off a win over Mackenzie Dern. Both of them just lost to Zhang Weili recently. Both were out grappled. I think it's a fun striker versus striker matchup between those two women. Then looking at the BMF title fight, Max Holloway coming off just a legendary performance. I think he should be fighting Ilia Topuria. Now, Max is another guy similar to Pereira where he has a ton of options available to him. If he wanted the 155-pound title fight, he probably could have gotten it, in June or maybe later on if he really looked for it. But it does look like he wants the Ilia Topuria fight. And while I do think in theory Volk deserves a rematch, you can't put Max Holloway on the sidelines after what he just did. If he wants that title shot next, I think he should get it. That's the biggest fight you can make in that division. Ilya just ran through Volk the first time. Like, this one actually has some real intrigue behind it. Who's actually going to win? Ilya coming off the amazing performance. Holloway coming off an amazing performance. I do think that's the fight to make here. I also think there are some other potential options that could kind of become available here over the next couple of months. We know the UFC announced Dustin Poirier fighting for the title. You have the Conor McGregor-Michael Chandler fight. I know it's a long shot, but if Dustin Poirier wins that title fight, I don't think they're giving Islam an immediate rematch, and I don't think they're giving that title shot to Arman Tsarukyan, because this is just opening the doors for Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway, 3 for the belts. You have the Conor McGregor fight. Conor could become an option for Max Holloway or potentially fighting for the 155-pound title. So things could open up here, but right now I do like the Holloway-Ilya fight. And then the loser of that matchup, Justin Gaethje. I seriously think Justin Gaethje is going to consider retirement. I think if he lost to Rafael Fiziev, he was going to retire. He ends up getting the win there. He wanted to make a run for the belt. This is a pretty serious setback, right? Getting put out cold. It's a lot of damage. He's talked about how he is very aware of trying to not take a ton more damage throughout the rest of his career. So I would not be surprised if he does retire. If he does not retire, I really think him fighting Dan Hooker would be very fun. Just another absolute war between two dogs. So maybe retirement. If not retirement, I do like the Dan Hooker fight, but he's probably going to be taking a long time off after this one. So the division could look completely different in 6 months from now when he could be looking for a new opponent. Now, also on the main card, Arman Tsarukyan beating Charles Oliveira. I think Arman Tsarukyan's next fight should be against Islam Makhachev if he beats Dustin Poirier. So apparently Tsarukyan was offered the title shot in June. No one should be criticizing him for turning that down. He was just in a very tough 3-round fight. What's that, like 6 weeks away? So definitely not blaming him at all for turning that fight down. And Islam is a big favorite. So if Islam wins, I think Arman should be next. I do think there are some pathways for Arman Tsarukyan to get screwed out of this spot, even though he does deserve the title shot. Like I said originally, if Poirier wins, I don't think they're going to have Poirier defend against Arman Tsarukyan. First off, I think they're teammates, not that that would prevent them from fighting, but Poirier just opens up some massive fights you can make at 155. And I also think that if Conor McGregor knocks out Michael Chandler, we're probably getting Conor McGregor, Islam Makhachev. I know Conor may not necessarily have earned it, but I'm just warning you guys. That's what we're going to get. You're going to get the Conor Khabib's Prodigy and Islam Makhachev. That's the storyline they're going to build. So I think there's a real shot that Arman Tsarukyan gets kind of screwed out of his title shot, but I do think he is deserving of fighting for that belt after beating Charles Oliveira. And then for Charlie Olives, I think he should take a little bit of time off just to kind of see how this 155-pound division kind of, unfolds. Because sometimes you see this, guys jump right back into it, and then they're having to fight 2-3 more times before they get a title shot. But I do think Charles Oliveira's next fight should be against Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot's won 3 in a row. He's lined up for a step up in competition. I think it's a competitive fight. Gamrot can be hurt. He's going to initiate the grappling. There's going to be submission opportunities for Charles Oliveira. And then one other fight that could be out there if the UFC is not going to give Holloway the 145-pound title shot. Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway for the BMF title. As fans, I don't think anyone's going to turn that one down. So that could also be out there. But I think more realistically, Charles should take some time off and then eventually fight Mateusz Gamrot. And then the final fight on the main card, Bo Nickal, Cody Brundage. For Bo Nickal, he's made it very clear he wants to take a slow approach into the rankings. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think a good step up in competition would be Gerald Meerschaert. He is a legit submission artist, which I think kind of lines up well with Bo Nickal's wrestling, poses an interesting threat. 28 of Meerschaert's 36 wins are by submission. That's crazy. Now, Meerschaert is outside the rankings, but he's also shown a willingness to take fights against some really tough up-and-comers. He fought Joe Pyfer. He fought Khamzat Chimaev early on in Chimaev's UFC run. So I think this matchup makes a lot of sense. And then Cody Brundage, Dusko Todorovic. It's kind of funny. This fight seems so insignificant to every other fight I'm going to talk about on this card. But Dusko's coming back from a knee injury. He's going to be over a year removed. And Dusko's 3-4 in the UFC. Brundage 4-5, so I think it makes sense with where they're both at in their UFC careers. Now, looking at the prelims here, already talked about Jiri Prochazka, Jamahal Hill. I think that's definitely the fight to make. For Aleksandar Rakic, if Khalil Roundtree is not getting a short notice turnaround for 301, I think it makes sense to have Rakic go up against Khalil Roundtree. Rakic was number 5 ranked heading into this past weekend. Roundtree's number 8 ranked. A loss to Jiri, who was number 1 or number 2 contender, that's not going to tank his stock at all. Roundtree's on a 5-fight win streak, coming off a big knockout over Anthony Smith, so I think that makes a lot of sense between those two. Then looking at Aljamain Sterling's next fight, the 145-pound division is very interesting at this point, and it's kind of backed up because you have some confusion at the top for the title, right? Is Ilya going to defend against Holloway? Is he going to defend in the rematch against Volkanovski? So we don't know how the title's going down. There could be just straight up 2 contenders lined up if both those guys are going to be getting opportunities. And then there are also multiple different top contenders. You have Movsar, who in a thinner division could have already earned a title shot. Like, if Volkanovski beat Ilya Topuria, Movsar Evloev's probably getting a title shot, but right now he feels so far away just where the division is. You have Brian Ortega, who's always going to be in contention, coming off a big win over Yair Rodriguez. Josh Emmett coming off a huge knockout win. So there are a lot of different options here for Movsar, and I don't know if he's going to want to fight in the near future, kind of like with what I was talking about with Charles Oliveira. Like, does a win even really do anything for him at this point? Like, he should probably gear it up towards when the 145-pound title is being defended. But I think Movsar Evloev taking on Aljamain Sterling is pretty interesting. Neither of these guys are known for being super exciting fighters, but I think they actually match up stylistically pretty well against each other because Movsar likes to initiate the wrestling. Aljamain Sterling is a great submission artist, so I think they're kind of going to go against each other pretty well. It's not going to be like Aljo grinding down a striker where you want to see the striker go to work, and instead he's like stifling that. I think they play into each other's skill sets pretty well. And I just think of like the top contenders at 145. If Aljo's fighting up, I think he's more likely to be able to get a fight against Movsar than a guy like Brian Ortega, who I don't know if he's going to be as interested in fighting back in the rankings, especially coming off a win. And then the loser of that Aljo fight, Calvin Kattar, I think he should be fighting the winner of Edson Barbosa and Lerone Murphy, which is taking place May 15th. Kattar definitely needs a step back in competition. That was a tough challenge, coming off a long layoff with his knee injury. I think stepping back a little bit, getting a nice matchup against a striker in Barbosa or Murphy would do good things for Calvin Kattar, and I just think, either of those opponents would be a really fun fight. Then we're going to go with Kayla Harrison. She's got to be fighting for the title against Raquel Pennington. I know Juliana Pena's out there, but Kayla's just undeniable for the 135-pound title. It seems very, very likely that Kayla Harrison is just going to run through Raquel Pennington, and then that sets up a potential monster fight against Amanda Nunes if she does want to come out of retirement. And then speaking of retirement, I think Holly Holm's going to be done after this one. She's, in her 40s, and she's talked about how she's not interested in just fighting. Like, she's not interested unless she thinks she has a legit shot to win the title. And even though she's kind of been up and down, she's always been right there towards the top, where if she strung together an extra win or two, she probably could have gotten another title shot. That was a bad loss. It was dominant. I think she's out of the title picture at this point, and I think she is going to walk away. Maybe she wants one more fight to go out on top, but I think she's going to retire very, very soon, so that would be the next step. Then next up is going to be Diego Lopes taking on Bryce Mitchell. I think there's a lot of options out there for Diego Lopes. It just depends on how much the UFC actually wants to push him. But like I talked about earlier on with kind of like how the featherweight division's clogged up at the top, I think if it was very thin and they needed top contenders, I think they'd push Diego Lopes a little bit more aggressively, maybe like a Yair Rodriguez coming off of his loss to Brian Ortega. But since there are a lot of top contenders already in the picture, I think they'll slow play it a little bit. I think Bryce Mitchell is a nice step up in competition. I believe Sodiq Yuseff was number 13. I think Bryce Mitchell is ranked at number 10. Mitchell is coming off that brutal loss to Josh Emmett where he got knocked out bad, but that was like one of the last cards of 2023. So if this fight's taking place like late 2024, there is going to be a lot of distance between that matchup. Both these guys are really impressive grapplers, so I think they also match up pretty well stylistically. Then we're going to go with Sodiq Yuseff, who's coming off the loss here to Diego Lopes. I think he's going to be fighting outside of the rankings. He'll probably still be ranked. Maybe they've actually released those yet. Not sure. But I think he should take on the winner of Joanderson Brito and Jack Shore. Now, there are, a bunch of different, like, kind of featherweight fights taking place, either at the back of the rankings or right outside the rankings. So maybe it's not the Brito-Shore winner, but I think this could make a lot of sense. He's going to need to give someone a shot at the rankings. Joanderson Brito's on a 4-fight win streak. Jack Shore looking for his second win up at 145. So I think that could make sense. And then Renato Moicano up next. And I think there's two different guys in this video that you could give the Paddy Pimblett fight to. I chose to give it to Renato Moicano. These two have been going back and forth for the past few months. It seems like Renato Moicano is definitely willing to kind of fight back in the rankings. Now, if he's kind of off of this Paddy fight and he wants to try to make a title run, then he's definitely deserving of a step up in competition or a step up in the rankings. But I think this is probably the biggest name he could get and probably the easiest matchup. So Does he want to jump up and, try to fight one of those upper echelon guys, or is he going to fight potentially a bigger name, maybe get paid more, and it's probably going to be a much more favorable matchup for him? And then it's also just going to give Paddy a shot at the rankings. At this point, he needs to step up in competition. I think Renato Moicano, it definitely fits the bill there. And then the loser from the Renato Moicano matchup, Jalin Turner, I think he should fight Benoit Saint-Denis. Both these guys are going to be coming off losses. I think both these guys are still top 15 caliber. Maybe September in Paris, they're probably going to get Benoit in Paris. We'll see if Jalin Turner wants to travel there, but I think that's a pretty interesting matchup at the bottom of the 155-pound rankings. Then we're going to have the Jessica Andrade-Marina Rodriguez matchup. For Jessica Andrade, I think she should take on Virna Jandiroba. Seems like Andrade is kind of in gatekeeper territory, but I do think an extra win or two could put her right back into another title shot. But I think Virna definitely deserves this opportunity. She's won 3 straight: Angela Hill, Marina Rodriguez, Lupi Godinez. I think it's a pretty competitive matchup between those two women. And then for Marina Rodriguez, I think she should be fighting Angela Hill. Nice striker versus striker matchup. You like to see Marina out there getting in those striking battles. Don't want to see her get grappled all day long. Angela Hill's coming off a win. She's 3-1 in her last 4, so she's kind of rolling. I think it's a nice step up for Angela, and it's a nice step back for Marina Rodriguez. Then we're going to have the Bobby Green, Jim Miller fight. There was a few different options. I think lightweight's kind of in a weird spot because you have the guys at the top. You have some guys, Michael Chandler already booked. Justin Gaethje probably going to be taking some time off. Some guys in the middle there like Rafael Fiziev is injured. So it's tough for Bobby Green to see him get like a significant jump up in competition just based where things are lined up. Maybe he gets like a Dan Hooker fight, but I also think Dan Hooker is deserving of fighting up in the rankings based on his win over Jalin Turner. Like we just saw Hooker beat Jalin Turner. Jalin Turner put Bobby Green out pretty bad. Obviously, MMA math doesn't work, but I think Hooker's in a position to fight up. So maybe Bobby Green also gets the Paddy fight. Pretty sure he called him out in his post-fight interview. But if he doesn't get that Paddy fight, I think the Matt Frevola matchup makes sense. Green was ranked at 14. Matt Frivola's 15, pretty much right at the same spot rankings-wise. And even though Frivola's coming off the loss, he was booked against Michael Johnson. I believe Michael Johnson pulled out. So Frivola should be looking for a fight. It doesn't seem like Bobby Green took a ton of damage, so I think that matchup's interesting. And then for Jim Miller, let's just get him some fun vet fights here. So I'm going to be going with Jim Miller, Clay Guida 2, rematch from 2019. Let's not be feeding Jim Miller to these young up-and-coming guys. I liked the Bobby Green matchup, but didn't go his way. Step back in competition, let him fight another legend in Clay Guida. And then from the curtain jerker from the prelims, Deiveson Figueiredo wins against Cody Garbrandt, and I think Deiveson Figueiredo should be fighting Corey Sandhagen. This should be the #1 contender fight for the winner of Sean O'Malley, Merab Dvalishvili. I know there's been talk about Corey Sandhagen fighting Umar Nurmagomedov. Personally, I'd rather see this matchup. I mean, see, Corey's a BMF for, wanting to fight Umar, but here's the way that I'm looking at it. Maybe some people are turning down Umar's fights. Obviously, that's frustrating. But Corey Sandhagen agreed to fight way back in the rankings against Umar Nurmagomedov. He might not have even been ranked at that point, or if he was, it was probably like 15, 14, 13, somewhere in there. So Corey agreed to fight way back. We were hearing all this stuff. Oh, no one wants to fight Umar. Everyone's scared of him. Corey agreed. Umar pulled out of their main event. So you can't pull out of the main event and then complain that nobody wants to fight you when you had that opportunity. I think Umar should get a step up, someone in like the 5 to 10 range. I believe he's ranked at number 10. I just don't think he's earned that shot against Corey Sandhagen. I think Deiveson Figueiredo has. He's obviously was a champ at 125. He has 2 wins at 135, one against Rob Font, and then one against Cody Garbrandt this past weekend. I think Rob Font is better competition than anyone Umar Nurmagomedov has faced. So I think Figgy deserves that opportunity. And I think Corey Sandhagen also deserves to fight someone with a little bit of a bigger name. Like, I think more people know Figgy compared to Umar. And so I think both those guys are in position for a #1 contender fight. I think Corey Sandhagen's earned a title shot already, but it doesn't seem like he's going to get it. And it does seem like he'll have to fight one more time. And then the final guy here, Cody Garbrandt. I want to see Cody Garbrandt fight outside the top 15. I want to see him go up against Davey Grant. Don't need to see these upcoming prospects. Let Cody Garbrandt get in striking battles with some other veterans. So Davey Grant, good striker, probably in like the 16 to 25 range in terms of where you would rank him in the division, but always in fun fights. let Cody get out there, stand and bang. I think that matchup makes a lot of sense. And that's going to wrap it up for every single matchup here, every single fighter booking them for their next matchup. How you guys feeling about these fights? Let me know down below. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.